I would like to ask if Tony Fain is there.
Hello. Hello, Andrea.
Hi, Tony. How are you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can see you. Pretty
Okay.
good. Hi. So
Hi.
we are launching the nanofiltration book, and Tony has sent me a few slides. So we're going to do this together. And I have already a mistake on the first slide in that the book launched, the e-version is published not yesterday, but today. So nanofiltration principles, applications in new materials. I'll start with, in fact, probably Tony should start with this one. It's the beginnings of nanofiltration in 1984, where a name was born. Simply, how did we come up with this book on nanofiltration? And then there's some citations from the forwards, and Tony will pick up some of them later. Nanofiltration offers the membrane scientist a variety of membrane possibilities and a plethora of fascinating applications. And nanofiltration is the wine menu accompanying a meal. I don't know if that was a French person saying that. An opportunity for creativity and exploration. Now, this was Rob Pedersen, the former director of research, and I think also head of film tech. And then David Furukawa, who gave us the forward for this edition, was in the marketing. He was looking out to perhaps today's young, bright minds can develop new membranes that afford a pathway to the solution of membrane fouling, or the future of nanofiltration continues to be promising, challenging, and ever-changing. So big words, and also an anecdote of a recent communication with Hervé Brisson, who I believe is also in the audience. Nanofiltration has moved slowly from a filed RO membrane status to the nanotechnology-based membrane separation thing. Well, my comment back to him was, well, if Veolia recognizes the technology, then it must be on its way out already. Fact is, in the late 90s, there was no book that covered nanofiltration explicitly, and it was somehow something between ultrafiltration and reverse osmosis, and like Hervé said, very much a failed RO membrane. Put it in perspective. Where is nanofiltration? It's there in purple between nanofiltration and ultrafiltration. Traditionally, and I think Tony explained this to me when I started my PhD with him about this work of, I think it was Richard at the time, who said, well, you can separate monovalent from multivalent ions. There's clearly an overlap with both ultrafiltration and reverse osmosis. There's pores in the order of a nanometer, and that, of course, allows a lot of relevant contaminants to be separated. I remember my first impressions of nanofiltration was certainly Mary-sur-Oise in France, where it was implemented full scale. I think it was 1993, at least a demonstration plant then, for the pesticide atrazine removal. So that was really a brave step to put something as complicated and advanced like nanofiltration into the water industry as a process. Now with this, Tony, it's up to you about the history.
Oh, thanks, Andrea. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Andrea asked me to say a few words, and of course, having been around in the membrane field for sort of decades, I tend to go down memory lane. So I thought, when was the first time I got a hint of what nanofiltration would be? That was in 1983 at a conference organized by Harry Lonsdale. He's the guy on the front row with a little red circle around his head. And at that meeting, there was a guy called John Cadott, who you will all have heard of, and he gave a presentation on some interesting membranes that he'd made. He's, in a sense, the father of the thin film composite RO, interphase polymerization, but he'd made some interesting membranes. Actually, I can see that Mark has just sent me a little comment. Mark, I think you might have also been at that Sun River meeting. There are not many of us left who were at that meeting, but it was a fantastic introduction to the rock stars of membranes at that stage. So John Cadott talked about these interesting membranes, and in 1984, a year later, of course, at Film Tech, they had this get together and came up with a name. And I think Bob Peterson, Robert Peterson, claimed, yeah, and probably rightly, that he was the person that came up with a name. In 1988, we had our second international conference in Sydney, IMSTEC conference, and John Cadott came to that meeting, and he presented a paper called Nanofiltration Membranes Broaden the Use of Membrane Separation Technology. So by that point in time, of course, the name nanofiltration was well established. Those proceedings were actually published in Desalination, and I think Miriam is also virtually at this current meeting, and I think Miriam would also remember that meeting in 1988. I think Aura Kedding gave a wonderful talk about biological membranes and the artificial kidney, and left us all wondering how we could compete with nature. But that was my introduction to nanofiltration, and then in the early 90s, I got involved with a guy in Western Australia who was working on a contaminated groundwater, which contains sulfate ions and chloride ions. And lo and behold, when we tried to concentrate up or remove water from this, we saw negative rejection of the chloride ions. And again, that's a fascinating feature, I think, of nanofiltration, that it can give you some enhanced separation if you've got the right ratio of the molar concentrations of the divalent and the monovalent material. It was about the middle of the 90s, 96, Andrea started with us at New South Wales and did a very interesting PhD on membranes in the water industry. I think she was focusing on NOM, humic acids, and so on. And in that thesis, she did some very nice comparisons between the nanofiltration membrane removal of NOM compared to what you could get with a hybrid process with coagulation plus UF plus or plus MF, and very interesting, I guess, trends in terms of rejection versus pore size. So nanofiltration was quite a feature of Andrea's PhD. So I guess it wasn't a surprise when Andrea had finished the PhD and had started as an academic at New South Wales, that she came up with a proposition, that it was time there was a book for nanofiltration, because essentially, we've got the Membrane Handbook, 1992, and in 1992, the Membrane Handbook didn't have a separate chapter on nanofiltration. Here we go. It was covered in the reverse osmosis chapter, and it was mentioned, of course, because the word was now as part of the sort of the membrane the membrane sort of nomenclature. But I think what Andrea perceived was that there really was a need for a book. So between that 1992 to 2000, about 1,000 publications on nanofiltration, and David Furukawa provided the graph at the top right-hand corner for the first edition on the growth of NF. So I guess the 1990s was when nanofiltration really grew to be visible, to be seen, and to need its own book. So I'd like to take the opportunity actually to say that Andrea was the driver of all of this. It was her enthusiasm and determination that got that first edition published. And of course, we now find ourselves It's now 15 or so years, 16 years since that first edition. Web of Science has another 12,000 publications, and I think in the second edition we've also got information on the increased installation of nanofiltration. So it is a very big topic. It's a fascinating membrane technology. It's very timely to have the second edition, and I would like to thank Andrea for all the effort she's put in to bring this together again. So Andrea, let me hand over to you again. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Tony, and yeah, thank you for bearing it. I'm looking back, I'm sometimes amazed how we pulled that, and I looked at some archives the last few days. But to pick up on what you said, we did some research for the new edition on what the numbers are looking. And I remember in the first edition, we were really thinking, well, is nanofiltration really separate, or is it just in with the ultrafiltration, the nanofiltration? And if we look at the number of publications of nanofiltration between 1985, which is the birth of nanofiltration, through to now, we see this generally quite significant growth in membranes, but it's really been very, very close to reverse osmosis, with ultrafiltration being quite higher and a significant growth. So, 95, 2000 is when we started thinking there is room. And I think that's been very clearly confirmed now in the existence of the first edition of the book. If you look at these number of papers, and on the left, this is all journals. On the right, it's just the Journal of Membrane Science journals. We look at what is actually nanofiltration used for, and we see there are a huge dominance of the water nanofiltration, but also very important, of course, the solvent nanofiltration that's kind of falling at some kind of distance. So there's significant research interest since the mid-90s. And yeah, in that case, of course, it was a very exciting topic to start with, which I think we didn't quite realize at the time. Then we look at market, technology transfer, uptake, and what does it mean? And we did, for this book, negotiate quite hard, both Tony and I, to get some market figures. And Ryan Sullivan from BCC Research eventually gave us the reports. We're seeing a global market value that's increasing almost in parallel with the publications. So a huge market, a compound annual growth rate around the 15-16%. So really massive interest in nanofiltration. And of course, as we know, the membrane prices are very much linked to this market uptake of processes in nanofiltration membranes, much like reverse osmosis and ultrafiltration have become very, very affordable in recent years. Now, this book, I remember, and I looked a little bit in the archives, so there was Joe Eckenrode from Technomic who approached me sometime early 2000, I think, with wanting a book. And nowadays, this is felt like we get these requests daily, but back then it seemed quite unusual, and for me as a PhD student anyhow. So at the time I said, well, you can have a book, take my PhD, it's ready, publish that. And off we went, and I said, well, actually, we really need a book in nanofiltration. But of course, that seemed an unsurmountable task. I can't find my sent folder, but I saw some replies from you, Tony, and from David Waite in October 2000, when we said, well, I think it's a good idea. That was in October. And in December, we submitted the proposal and invited contributors that had agreed to put a contribution to this book that was due to be submitted in August 2001 and to be about 300 pages long. Well, I think the drama with deadline was already going on there. We published it eventually in 2005. It had 550 pages. And then for the last, I don't know, it feels like 10 years, I've been saying, well, we need an update, we need a new edition, but time just wasn't there. So we now have a 2-volume book coming out today as the e-version, and then an online version in the next few weeks, and in August or late July, then the book copy, 2 editions, 1,200 pages. I have to say that a lot of the pages are due to the editing style. We didn't quite double the contents, but we have a book with 65 expert contributors, authors from 16 countries, and always analyzed. We got the satisfactory 23% women. So I think we need to improve a little bit there yet. Tony's smiling. To show you what this book is about. Well, the first part is about the principles, the textbook of nanofiltration. So that spans from the history of nanofiltration, which is written, by the way, by Charles Lindor and Ora Kedem, who Tony mentioned. Then we're going on to materials, how to make these membranes, how to characterize them, engineering both the processes, but also making appropriate models, which were still modules, and then the models through to fouling. So we're really about understanding nanofiltration. And you've seen also from the talk of Guy Ramon, we don't really understand these processes very well yet. So this is the first part. You see the names of the contributors there. Then we have part 2, which is the big core of the book, the applications. And there, of course, you see a huge domination from the water treatment and water reuse, so the main applications, through to all sorts of niche or industrial waste of processing, food, chemical, pulp and paper, textile, through to process design, bioreactors, photocatalysis. And I have to say here, it was incredibly difficult, and I don't know if Markus Kibortz is here today, incredibly difficult to get good data that can be published in, for example, chemical processing. And so Tony helped a lot there with this really headache chapter to try and get some good input, because of course, a lot of the results, a lot of the process knowledge is secret, it's protected, so people are not really wanting to share their trade secrets. I think we got a good compromise, a good content. We have some new chapters in there. There's a retentate treatment chapter that's new, and then a coupling with renewable energies. And really overall 14 chapters of applications. And then we have a new part on new materials, which is of course very fascinating. But at the same time, it asks me the question, I asked myself the question again and again, well, what is nanofiltration? Is a reaction in a nanopore, carbon nanotube membranes, is this nanofiltration? I think it deviates from our original definition, but I think it is very much nanofiltration, where we're using this nanoscale for separation, for reactions, and so including this kind of reactive membrane into the topic. I think this chapter will, this part of the book will grow a lot. We actually had agreed in the publication, well, if we can't have one volume, if we need two, then please make 3, and then we keep working on this part 3 to expand it. I've now been told no, it's included in the second one, but it can be split later. So I think here is where we see a lot of excitement in the next few years, and of course the discussion, what is nanofiltration? We've had more than 40 international experts involved in peer review. I really hope I didn't forget anyone. Of course, it's time, it's deadlines, it's nagging. You know, I know how horrible I behave when I get asked to review multiple times daily, not responding. So thank you to all these reviewers. A few of them are in the audience for responding in a timely manner. Tony, you're on there. You shouldn't probably be as an editor, but Tony has helped tremendously with a lot of last-minute reviews as we were approaching the deadline. So I think there. And then, yes, I kept a secret, and I don't know how well I kept the secret because it's actually to be found in Google. We have dedicated this book, or I have decided as an executive discussion to dedicate this book to what I see the 2 big legends in the field. Miriam Balaban is there in the audience. Ora Kedem we invited. I don't think she's with us today. And well, I've looked up for some pictures, and I found one that really is the best representation of this, the woman, the legend. We would put an S to that. Ora Kedem, I made contact years ago, I think it was 2017, when I was battling setting up a membrane technology department. And I really thought, how did she do that in Israel 2 generations ago? And it was quite characteristic. I gave her a call. I found out her phone number. I called Ora and said, look, could we meet up? She said, well, you know, I'm a very private person now. I said, well, you know, maybe a walk and maybe lunch. Okay, well, let's meet for lunch. And at the end of the conversation, she just said, well, you know, I'll be at the conference. No, I didn't know that. We had a very nice conversation, and as it turned out, at the conference, she was at the meal, at the lunch, she was complaining how she was battling PowerPoint, everything had changed. And so it turns out that Aura gave the keynote lecture at the conference that, of course, Miriam Balaban organized. Aged at the time, 93. And Miriam, I think we all know, we have had a lot of good conversations last few years. I think, I wasn't in the field when these two women reached retirement age, although I can't quite say this word because they have not and will not retire. But Miriam is just absolutely everywhere. We had some very amusing conversations about feminism. We also have had, or I have had a lot of encouragement from Miriam, and the latest just last week, where she wrote, "I hope your dreams are being fulfilled. Don't worry about pitfalls on the way." And she based that on Theodor Herzl, the visionary of the State of Israel. "If you wish it, it is no dream." And so these two women here pictured with some images, in a man's world. I noticed your conference photo, Tony, there was not a single woman there.
I'm very sorry about that. I noticed that too.
So they have made it, and they're just such an incredible inspiration. Now I've put this dedication in the book. Here's some photos that are, of course, very recent from 2017. And that keynote lecture happened, Miriam in Toulouse, 2019. And we took at the time at the conference that Corinne, who I think is also there in the audience, organized. We take this cool photo of, for once, just women. Nothing against men, but it's also nice to have some women. And there's an empty chair there, and I'd just like to say there is space for a lot more women in the field, and there's plenty more chairs or things to do available. So the membrane family has been a very welcoming one over the many years, and I just like to hope that we get more women take part. And I'd like to say a very, very big thank you to both Aura and Miriam for being such inspirational role models, never stopping, true legends and pillars in membrane science and technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. I should say a few words. That you're always pressing for women to be in the field. And I always tell you, we just work hard and we get there without considering whether we're women or men. But it's been really very exciting to see your new institute, where you have a home, I hope now, where you can continue to do all the creative work that you have been doing and will do. And also, I was very happy to see that you also emphasized scientific writing as something that you wanted your students to learn. I also want to congratulate you and Tony for this book. And I have here the cover of the conference that you had in 1988, Tony, that you mentioned. It's right here, the celebration, yes, which I have right in the back of me on the shelf.
Fantastic. So, lovely to see you, Miriam. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you, Tony, and I hope we will meet again someday. I met Aura just about a week ago, and we took a very nice picture. I will send it to you, Andrea, so that you have that also for your file. She's doing very well, and she's going to have a birthday, a very important birthday in another 2 days. So thank you, and really congratulations very much to your institute, to your new endeavor, where I hope you will have a home where you can create and continue to have around you new researchers, and also to gather us from around the world. Thank you so much. And I know that you think that women don't have enough recognition. Well, I always told you, if we work hard, we get there, and it really doesn't matter. And you have worked hard, and you are creative. So I wish you really great success and continued work. And Tony, also very best wishes.
Yes, and to you, Miriam, and to you.
You've been a mentor.
I've tried.
Well, I congratulate you also that you are a successful wife, mother, and woman, as well as the researcher, where I told you is your really fame and function and creativity. Just continue.
No, thank you very much for being there. And I will share my little victory even after our feisty discussion about feminism. Next time I met Miriam, she asked me, "Yeah, Andrea, I've been thinking about this."
I always tell her, work hard, it doesn't matter whether you're a woman
or not. Could it be that I didn't get funding because I was a woman? So that was my little victory. So at least you're thinking about it. So we want equal opportunities and equal treatment. And of course, women can do that. I would add much better sometimes. So no, thank you for being there. Now, I think Dr. Howard Weinreich is also in the audience. He sent me this yesterday after months of nagging and setting a final deadline in the end. So he then said, okay, the book isn't coming out yesterday, but today. So we have the ebook published. I haven't checked yet, so there should be a link. It should be there. The second edition, it has 1,264 pages. A lot of figures are in color, so that's very nice. Over 3,000 literature references, excessive, I guess. And yes, there's the 2 volumes. It's there and hot off the press. The print edition will be published on August the 4th. Links are down there. Of course, I couldn't save myself being cheeky and putting in that the price with Wiley is 330 euros and the price with Amazon 240. So I guess you will make your decision. No. The book launch of the hard copy will be at the Nanofiltration conference next year. We're going to get a special edition in a single volume because I wasn't very happy with that being split. And Wiley will be funding the drinks. Now, seeing that they saved a lot of money today with about 400 participants today and no drinks, and the conference, we will be limited to about 100, 120. So I would suggest that Wiley may want to cover the whole conference dinner and make sure that we're doing well after all this effort of publishing this book. So with this, now why would you want to read 1,200 and something pages? Well, I guess, as we said, it's a book, it's a comprehensive works to grasp a myriad of principles that underpin nanofiltration. It will develop further the multitude of applications that nanofiltration can serve. I don't think that has been fully exploited yet. It puts novel materials developments onto a solid foundation of process understanding. I think we need a little bit more of that in all this materials research, that we really need to understand what does a material change actually then affect in the process? Does it actually help to have more flux? Does it help to have denser pores? I don't think we know the answers to all of these questions. And then we're really looking for a new generation of membrane materials and processes with unprecedented capabilities. And as we have cited from the foreword, we want to, the next generation of people, the next generation of membranes contribute to public life, public health, saving lives. I think there's not much that we can do that's more significant now. And combined with that, of course, on a very full planet, a cleaner environment by removing more contaminants with less energy. So with that, thank you very much and enjoy the read.